Good afternoon from London. It's a bit of a dull afternoon here in London, but weather is not too bad. And hello to all dear comrades, supporters and friends from Dr. Dermot Hudson, the chairman of the British group for the study of the Juche Idea, chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK, and official delegate of the Korean Friendship Association for the UK, and also president of the Association for the Study of Songun Politics UK, and of course the owner of this channel, Songun 007, the voice of Songun and Juche in the UK. And today's video is going to be titled South Korea Complete Colony of US Imperialism. And it may seem a bit obvious that South Korea is a colony of US imperialism, and indeed world imperialism and international monopoly capital. But recently a sort of question came up from a student, which was, is South Korea still an imperialised country? I presume, this meant, is it still a colonised or neo-colonised country? Or is it part of the imperial core? And the answer is yes, South Korea is a colony of US imperialism. And I would recommend reading chapter 3 of my book, In Defence of Juche Korea. The chapter is titled South Korea Colony of the US. And also the classic DPRK book, The US Imperialists Started the Korean War. There's a very good section in that book about how the US enforced colonial rule in South Korea after occupying it in 1945. And I can remember visiting the Korean Revolution Museum. That's the big museum on the Munsil Hill in Pyongyang, where the statues of the great leader President Kim Il-sung and the great leader Comrade Kim Jong-il stand. And I visited the Korean Revolution Museum, leading a delegation of the old Juche Idea study group of England. And we decided to look round the section on the South Korean Revolution and national reunification. And we were guided by a woman guide who'd originally come from South Korea and was a South Korean revolutionary. In the halls that were devoted to the South Korean Revolution and national reunification, there was a diagram and detailed information showing that South Korea is a colony of the US and is dominated in all fields by US imperialism. However, some people do dispute this, and once or twice we've had people say to us, "Ooh, you shouldn't be calling South Korea a puppet of the US. Ooh, don't call them puppets. How terrible." And, they're in denial about the colonial and puppet nature of South Korea. And indeed, over the years, there's been a massive propaganda exercise, a massive brainwashing campaign to falsely present South Korea as quote-unquote an independent state, which it's not. It's the last thing that it is. So anyway, let's look at the question analytically. South Korea is an artificial creation of US imperialism. It did not exist before 1945. Korea before then was one nation, a homogeneous nation with the same culture and language, and a history of 5,000 years. There'd been no North or South Korea. And there was really no reason for Korea to be divided. But in fact, as some of you know, a US colonel took a map of Korea and a ruler and a pencil and drew a line through the map of Korea, thus dividing Korea. When US troops landed in South Korea on the 8th of September 1945, 3 weeks after Korea had been liberated from Japanese imperialist rule by the Korean People's Revolutionary Army, led by the great leader, President Kim Il-sung, the US troops almost immediately started killing Koreans and dissolved the People's Committees in South Korea. Now, People's Committees had been set up in all parts of Korea in 1945 as organs of popular rule, organs of popular power. And the US imperialists also banned the Communist Party. And the US for 3 years ruled through a direct military administration in South Korea, and after that created a puppet regime. And for this they brought back Syngman Rhee, a very discredited figure, well known for corruption, who had lived outside Korea for years, in fact lived in Hawaii, and he became the first puppet ruler of South Korea. And the fact was that South Korea was set up in such a way that it would be a permanent colony of US imperialism. You know, that there were certain structures created in South Korea which have never been dismantled. US troops, I think 28,000 or 30,000 ground troops, plus the Air Force, US Air Force and Navy, occupy South Korea to this very day. And it's not just the US military. You've also got the US Central Intelligence Agency in South Korea and other US intelligence agencies, such as the Defense Intelligence Agency. And also there's a huge army of what are apparently US civilians in South Korea. I think about 150,000 of them at the last count. And this is a form of neocolonialism. You know, all these expats from the US living in South Korea. And of course, it's not just a question of US troops being in South Korea. You know, a lot of people would say, but, you know, there's US troops in many countries in the world, including Britain. For example, you know, we've got US bases in the eastern part of the country, and those have never been withdrawn. You know, the fact is the US has a huge global empire of military bases all over the world, in dozens and dozens of countries. In fact, the US has the biggest empire in the history of the world. So, you know, people would say, well, you know, this is not unusual. This does not prove that South Korea is a colony of the US. But there are very important differences. Firstly, South Korea has a number of shackling treaties with the US. South Korea does not have wartime command over the South Korean puppet armed forces. This belongs to the US armed forces in South Korea. And you also have the so-called quote-unquote UN command in South Korea, which is an instrument of US neo-colonial rule in South Korea. But most importantly, US troops in South Korea enjoy extraterritorial privileges, which means that they can commit crimes such as rape, murder, robbery and so on, but they will not be tried in South Korea for these offences. They will be tried by the US military or by a US court. And in particular, I would mention the tragic case of the two young schoolgirls in South Korea who were walking home from school on June 13th, 2002, when a Yankee APC ran over them and killed them. And those US soldiers were not tried by a South Korean court and basically got off scot-free. And also, South Korea is actually paying for the privilege of the US occupying it. South Korea has to pay a huge amount of money in upkeep expenses for the US occupying troops. So this is actually a form of colonial tribute by the US. The US is in fact acting like the old colonial powers of the 19th century, which levied colonial tribute on their colonies. The US basically chooses the government in South Korea. All South Korean rulers have been, without exception, pro-US to a greater or lesser extent. Even the supposedly liberal presidents of South Korea, all those people who've come to power in South Korea, are pro-US, have ties to the US, have been educated in the US, have some kind of connection with the US. And in the case of the military dictatorships, had actually been trained at US military academies. And of course, the US will remove any South Korean ruler who becomes a liability to them. And a case in point was Park Chung-hee, who was assassinated by his own security chief in 1979 on the orders of the US, because he'd become a massive liability. He was very corrupt. He even bribed US congressmen with money from the US aid that he'd received, and I think the US saw that as a bit too much. And there's also economic domination and economic colonialism by the US. South Korea has a number of shackling economic agreements with the US, and it concluded a so-called free trade agreement. South Korea is a playground for the transnational corporations of international monopoly capital, particularly US capital. And just to give a list of US multinational companies in South Korea, it is as follows, and this is not an exhaustive or comprehensive list, but anyway, you have General Motors, Ford, IBM, Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, ITT, Apple, Berkshire Hathaway, Exxon Mobil, Energizer, Motorola, Chevron, Bank of America, Citibank, MetLife, JP Chase Morgan, Bank of New York, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, Dow Chemicals, McDonald's, Burger King and Pizza Hut, sorry, got those two mixed up, Kraft, Nike, Gap, Hilton Hotels, 7-Eleven, Jones Lang LaSalle and Starbucks, and that's just a few of them. And the US also exercises cultural domination and ideological domination in South Korea, because as you've got various US foundations at work in South Korea. You've got so-called US cultural centres, some of which got burnt down by anti-imperialist South Korean students. Bravo, keep up the good work. And you've got a lot of American teachers at South Korean universities, spreading imperialist ideology and culture in South Korea. And Korean culture in South Korea has become obliterated. The Korean language in South Korea has lost its purity. There is increasing use of American English words in South Korea, and in South Korea you will see many street signs written in English, and I was once watching some coverage of South Korean riot police attacking protesters, and on their riot shields it was written police in English, which just shows the extent of US domination and control in South Korea. We hope that one day the South Korean people will rise up and end US colonial rule, that the South Korean people will establish Juche, will expel the US troops from South Korea and reunify with their brothers and sisters in the north in People's Korea. And I think it's important for us in the UK to step up solidarity with the South Korean people, and it'd be good if KFA UK hold a picket of the South Korean puppet embassy, and the cry of "Down with the South Korean fascist puppet regime" is heard again on the streets of London. Thank you very much for watching this video and for your attention today. I'd also thank people for their continued support. We've got now 1,840 subscribers. So if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing, and also to our affiliated channel, KFA UK. And please share content from this channel as much as possible and tell your friends about it. You can also support us by participating in our events, both online and real life. And we've got a meeting coming up soon, on an online meeting on People's Career and anti-revisionism. So please look out for that. And also check out our publications spotlight on lulu.com. Link will be on the description. These books written by myself, but also other authors, and collectively written works. Please take a look. It would be good to sell more books in the UK. We've got good sales in the US and Germany, but not in the UK. We need more people to buy the books in the UK. Again, thank you for listening. Have a great day, and see you all again. Goodbye.